everybody. My name is Sarah Bonk, and a few years ago, when I was still working at Apple, I was also volunteering for a number of nonpartisan political reform organizations. And one day I received a report about money in politics, and that report said, corporations are the enemy. And there I was, working for the enemy. And it really made me wonder, is it that simple as us versus them? The way I see it, it's not quite that simple. The vast majority of business leaders do not wake up in the morning thinking, how can I make our system of government worse today? Really, they want, just like you and me, a government that works for all of us. Business leaders would rather build their business and compete in the marketplace than deal with politicians. But you don't have to take my word for it. I've put together 3 examples from history to show you that the public interest and the interest of the business community are way more aligned than you might think. My first example is the Boston Tea Party. Now, we all learned in elementary school that the colonists were very upset about taxation without representation, and that certainly is the case. But what you might not know is that the tea that the colonists threw in the harbor that day was actually tax exempt. Now, why would anybody protest lower taxes and saving money? I'll explain. You see, the British East India Company at the time was the world's largest corporation, and they had gone into debt, and they were bordering on bankruptcy. The British Parliament was very concerned about this and decided they were too big to fail, and bailed them out by giving them a tax exemption so that they could sell more tea and help get out of debt. And incidentally, I should mention that most of the members of the British government, including the king, were shareholders in the British East India Company. Big surprise, right? Well, this put the colonists and their businesses at a competitive disadvantage, and they were furious about it. It was threatening their very livelihood. So we could call this an example of mercantilism, rent-seeking, corporate welfare, but my favorite term is crony capitalism. That's a system where our lawmakers hand out special favors to corporations in exchange for money and gifts. That sounds like a pretty good deal if you're one of the cronies, but it's no good for the rest of us, and that includes other businesses. It's anti-competitive, it's anti-innovation, and over the long haul, it's bad for the economy and it's bad for consumers. My second example is the Tillman Act of 1907. This is a law that basically said corporations were not able to donate directly to the campaign of a federal candidate, a law that is still mostly in place today, though there are a lot of loopholes to that particular rule. Now, you may be wondering, why is Senator Tillman here holding a whip in this picture? You see, Senator Ben Tillman was a white supremacist, and the reason he endorsed this bill, the reason he put his name on it, was because he wanted to remove the power from the northern industrialists who he thought were too friendly to black Americans at that time. But that was a little digression from the main point, which is about the corporations in this story, who you may be surprised to learn supported this bill in large numbers. In fact, the New York Times wrote an article about it called Happy Corporations. Why is that? Well, the reason is that when corporations were allowed to donate directly to these candidates, some of the more corrupt candidates on the slate would basically hit them up for money in a kind of mafia-style protection racket. In other words, extortion. Now, extortion is a very strong word, but I'm pretty sure that's what you call it when you ask somebody for money and threaten them just to get their money. So while we may talk a lot about pay-to-pay politics in America and the fact that that amounts to legalized bribery, it's important to note that the reverse is also true in this case. My final example here is the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002, which you may know as McCain-Feingold. This is a bill that was known for limiting soft money and issue ads, as well as the famous saying, "I'm Sarah Bonk and I approve this message." Overall, it was designed to close a number of loopholes in our campaign reform system. This was not an ideal act at all. In fact, it introduced a number of new loopholes, and a lot of it has been struck down by the Supreme Court. But the reason I bring it up here is because this is a bill that had no direct and obvious benefit to the business community at all. And yet a large number of business leaders spoke out and lended their influence to the effort to pass this reform. McCain and Feingold themselves said that it wouldn't have passed without the engagement from the business community. My point here is to say that business leaders in America, for the most part, really care about our system of government. Just like you and me, they want a system that works, and for a couple reasons. Certainly they want it because when government is working well, it's better for our businesses and our economy, but they also care because the future of our country is at stake. The interest of the public and the interest of business are aligned in so many ways, and when we find that common ground and come together, we can work on advancing these meaningful bipartisan improvements to our system, and that is something that benefits all of us. So if you're an activist working on this today, I hope that you will join me in welcoming our allies from the business community. And if you're a business leader, I hope that you will join me in fighting for better rules and better laws to improve our elections and improve our government for all of us. Thank you very much.